birth of Fender is one of the most interesting stories in the history of guitar manufacture, and it's been told many times. But there's another story, equally as compelling as the birth of Fender in the early 1950s, and that's the rebirth of Fender in the early 1980s. The guitar business was doing pretty well throughout the 1970s, but several things came together in the late 70s and certainly in the early 80s that were tough on Fender. First of all, the import guitars were getting better and better. Next, there was this lingering stigma, the pre-CBS guitars. For a long time, the hippest thing you could own was a new Fender. Now, the hippest thing you could own was an old Fender. There was the rise of this whole vintage guitar market, this mentality of old guitars as collectibles, and people were spending hundreds and hundreds, thousands of dollars for old Strats and old Telecasters. Then there was the general economic downturn that hit in about 1981. Finally, by 1984, CBS had had enough, and they announced that Fender was going on the block.
CBS decided to get out of the entire music business. And we were the first ones to go. We were the most attractive, they thought. But we went through a series of downsizing the factory, shutting down, talking to anybody that thought they had 50 cents in their pocket to buy Fender, coming in, nosing into the books and trying to find out. And it was a very demoralizing time. And trying to hold enough workforce together to keep it operating until we could sell it or dissolve it. And there was talk of just dissolving the company.
And a lot of these guys really weren't serious. They just wanted to find out what was going on. And at first, in the middle of '84, they did not offer it so it could be an employee buyout. It wasn't until November or December of '84 that they finally said, well, listen, we're not getting any offers from anybody else. So let's, if you guys can come up with an offer that's better than liquidation, then we'll sell it to you.
Well, they thought it was great because they were going to get off the hook. They were going to save a little bit of image by not dissolving the company, and they were very cooperative. They did everything they could do to help me buy the company. At the very last moment, they lent me $2.5 million, I believe.
The sale of Fender, continuing the tradition by Tom Wheeler. After months of rumors, speculation, and negotiations, the long wait may finally be over. I was the editor of Guitar Player from 1981 to 1991, and during the middle part of the 80s, one of the biggest stories we were covering was the fate of Fender. Now, there was a press conference on February 1st, 1985, at an industry trade show. And I remember going to there, I remember the atmosphere in the room. It was, frankly, a mix of cautious optimism and uncertainty, because everybody was pulling for Fender, but we didn't really know if this new team could pull it off. They had a couple of important announcements to make that day. One was that they were going to downsize the company, which seemed like a pretty good idea, because it seemed that Fender had gotten too big, too bulky, too unresponsive to the needs of its customers. The other announcement was that while some of the guitars, the top-end vintage reissue guitars, would be made on American soil, the rest of them would be imported from Japan.
After Bill and his group of investors purchased the company, it was real lean. I mean, those of us were left maybe 100 employees out of 800 and some. Saw a lot of our friends and coworkers leave. A lot of uncertain times in the future. At that point, we had no manufacturing facility in the States, so we were bringing in strictly 100% import product from Japan. My job at that point, I was a senior design engineer for research and development, had gotten to the point to where I was writing service manuals and doing artist relations. There was basically no design work left.
We bought the name. We bought what we thought we were going to be a distribution company, because we had this fine line of guitars from Fujigen Gaki in Japan. We were looking for some amplifiers somewhere to buy, and we were just going to sell the name, and we were doing well for the first month or so. However, the Big Seven got together and had a meeting, and that's when the yen started to rise. And at that time, we knew that we had better make some plans for the future in manufacturing.
This looks like a Stratocaster. It is a Stratocaster. It's an American-made Stratocaster, but it has a dozen or 2 dozen refinements over the original. It represents the commitment by Fender to get back to basics. We're going to get back to quality, we're going to fine-tune, but we're going to produce guitars that people who have been playing Fenders their whole lives are going to be perfectly comfortable playing, and they're going to have all the latest developments.
So more and more the dealers are saying, hey, we want American-made guitars. Fender's an American-made company, where 6 or 8 months before they didn't want any American-made guitars, you know, but now because the yen-dollar relationship had changed, the Japanese prices started to creep up to where they felt they should be getting an American-made product for that money. So within 18 months, from the time we opened the factory, we went from 7 units a day to 150 units a day. It was at a great expense as far as we had to use we had to reinvest whatever money we were making to be able to make that take place. It was, we had to hire a lot of people, we had to train a lot of people. We didn't want to make any of the mistakes that were made in the past. So it was a very difficult time. And so at that point in time, we sat down and we designed a product that we felt would be easy for the plant to make and would be what everybody wanted. And that was the American Standard Stratocaster as we know it today. That was George Blanda and myself that did that design. Little by little, we started to rebuild the company. Now, in October of '85, we opened up manufacturing out here in Corona, California, in 14,000 square feet, in an area now where I think we probably have a couple 100,000 square feet. In fact, maybe even more than that. But at that point in time, we had everything in there. And our goal was we were going to get up to making about 10 or 15 guitars a day. And we had a 5-year plan that at the end of 5 years would be up to 150 guitars a day.
We pretty much had the doors open to us. We could do anything we wanted to, and with what had been started when I came in here, I could see that there was a lot of potential, both from the standpoint of making good product, but also in being ingenious in the way we make things. There weren't any books written, there weren't any things to do, there wasn't a basic plan to follow. It was, we need instruments, we need them of this quality, we need them of this design, and we need this many of them. And that story hasn't changed since I've been here in the last 7 years. Every year we have produced more guitars. We've produced better guitars. We've produced a wider variety of guitars. I think when I started, we had 5 basic models and 8 colors per model, about 40 different models that we produced out of this facility. Today we're producing, I think, 41 or 42 different models out of this facility with 8 or 10 colors per model, so do the math. I buy my wood seasoned, kiln dried, ready to make into a guitar.